Hey everyone. Yeah, I'm smiling because to be honest with you, chapter three, it's my favorite chapter of the entire book. I'm not gonna lie. I think the whole book is really wonderful, but I have a soft spot in my heart for chapter three, and the main reason is because it's all about the legal environment, and I am a lawyer, so much of chapter three is what I've done, ever since I graduated from law school. So I'm not saying it's more important than anything else that we cover. It's all important, but again, just from a personal standpoint, chapter three is my personal favorite. So the chapter starts off about talking about it's kind of this is about the laws, all the laws that affect us, and again, in page 118 of your book, you can see it right here. It kind of covers all the main laws that are relevant to employment and labor relations. So again, do I expect you to memorize this page? Absolutely not. So because there's too much to memorize, but I do want to highlight some of the main laws that I think are most relevant, and I think that will be relevant to you. Because again, why I think that this chapter is also relevant is because no matter what, even if you never go into HR, no matter you're all going to be employed in some way, shape, or form, and all these laws affect you as an employee, as a manager, and as a leader of others. So it's important, even though you may never be a lawyer or you may never work in HR, knowing these laws is absolutely critical for you to be a leader of others and to even be in the workplace in general. The first one I want to mention is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Again, Title VII is, we know a lot of us have heard, what, all about that, but really Title VII is the law that protects us protects us when we have protected characteristics. So it's the law that makes it illegal for employers to discriminate against you based on your age, religion, national origin, gender, things along those lines. So again, it's so critical just because, because a lot of these things are things you're inherently born with. And so for an employer to discriminate against you because of how old you are or because of your race or because of your gender. That's what this law is designed to protect. And it's probably the most famous of all the employment laws because, again, it came out of the Civil Rights Act in the mid 1960s. And again, and obviously it's been really, really relevant to all aspects of American employment ever since. So, again, very important to know Title VII. The second one that I really want you to know is the ADEA, the Americans, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. And again, this is a law that was passed to protect individuals as they get older. And so, if you want to call this is like the magic number. The magic number is 40. So once you turn 40 years old, you are protected from being discriminated against by your employer as you get older. Now, I know I get asked all the time, well, because does this law apply to me if I'm younger than 40? Well, in certain situations, it can if an employer can, if you can show that that an employer specifically treated you differently and maybe even tried to fire you because you were young. Again, those cases, to be honest with you, are very rare. So it's very rare to actually use this act if you're less than 40. But so just kind of remember that 40 is the magic number. That if you're 40 years of age or older, then you can use this law if you feel like you're being treated differently at your employer because of your age. And then the third major one that I want you to know is the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. This was passed in 1990. And again, it protects individuals with disabilities in the workplace. And so it also requires employers to create what we call reasonable accommodations. So if somebody has a disability or a medical impairment or something along those lines, your employer has certain legal obligations they have to meet to try to help you if you have a disability. And disabilities can be short term or long term. It can be long term like cancer or heart disease or diabetes or things like that. But it can also be short term like a broken leg or pregnancy or things along those lines. It covers the wide range of it. So again, all the other laws that I just showed you on that page are very important, and I definitely want you to read through them and try to learn them as best you can. But the three that I just mentioned, Title VII, the Age Discrimination Act, and the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, I think are the most important because, again, those are the ones that you're most likely to incur in your daily work. So, and then the book talks about the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is the government organization, the federal organization that's responsible for enforcing all these laws. So if you ever, feel like you're treated differently because of any protected characteristic, the EEOC is the government agency that you would file a complaint with. They're the ones who will investigate and determine if you've been discriminated against. And what's really interesting about the EEOC is most states in Missouri and Illinois are included with this. Is they require, you to go through the EEOC before you can file your own private lawsuit. So let's say you got fired from your job and you think the reason that you were fired is because they said you were too old. Well, before you can just go straight to the court system and file a lawsuit against your employer, most states require you to go through the EEOC first and then let them investigate and see what they can find. So again, make sure you read up about the EEOC because it's very important information that they have. Your book also does a really, really good job of talking about things like discrimination and sexual harassment. I'll get to sexual harassment in a second, but it talks about the different types of treatment that you can have. And so the two types that I want you to know are disparate treatment and disparate impact. So, and a lot of this relates to sexual harassment. So, for example, we've all probably heard the quid pro quo. That's a Latin term that means this for that. So, when it comes to sexual harassment, if somebody says, well, if you don't go out with me, you're going to be fired, or if you don't go on a date with me, then I'm going to let you go, or I'm going to demote you. So that most people kind of understand that aspect. But there's also, disparate treatment where, you tend to see situations where because of your age or because of your gender, you start getting treated differently. You start seeing, you get less promotions or, your pay doesn't go up related to other people. So, and again, this can be related to sexual harassment, but it's also related to any of the other protected characteristics. This disparate treatment where you're treated differently because of some aspect. You may not necessarily be fired, but, you don't get the pay raises. You don't get, other things that people get, or you have to do more work than other people because of your age or your gender. So make sure in your book you read very carefully differences between disparate impact and disparate treatment and sexual harassment and then quid pro quo, because again, those are all really, really key aspects of discrimination, and they might be on the exam too. So just, might want to keep that in mind too. One thing I should have mentioned, with the ADA, specifically the Americans with Disabilities Act, is about, and your book talks about reasonable accommodations, and honestly, as an ADA coordinator in my role, I spend a lot of times working with employees on what a reasonable accommodation is. So if somebody has a disability, how can I help them? Buying, at a small company, buying $1 million, special ramp and special chair and new office may not be reasonable because we can't spend that kind of money. But if getting a new chair or a new computer system, those tend to be reasonable. And those are the types of things that we focus on about what is and what is not reasonable. So make sure you read up in the book about what is and what is not reasonable when it comes to the ADA. Well, those are kind of the highlights for this chapter. Again, these are things probably the most relevant for the exam. But also, I think these are the areas that I want you to know most because, again, these are the areas you're most likely to encounter in your daily work itself. So if you have any questions about Chapter 3, please let me know. But again, I appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.